America is under attack. A red menace has swept through the South, invading homes, threatening the innocent. There's no place to hide when your worst nightmare's coming true. And there really are monsters under the bed. Post-war America, communism was the new enemy. People lived in fear of Reds under the beds. Horror movies played on this paranoia. But while people looked to the skies for an invasion that never came,
Gee whiz!
a far more insidious menace crept in beneath their feet. The red imported fire ant had begun its march across the South, an invading army that swept all before it. But even as wildlife was being decimated, few people suspected the true horror that was to come. Today, nothing is safe from the fire ant. The tranquility of suburbia hides an ever-present menace.
Let's get a bun ready. You can put them in here. Right.
In homes and yards across the South, danger is never far away. The fire ant has earned itself a terrible reputation.
I don't like them. The first day I moved to Florida, I ran into fire ants, and I wanted to move.
You've got an invader here that really impacts people, in not only in the urban environment, rural environment, but everything.
Personally, I don't like the fact that I can't go out barefoot. I've got to be extremely careful.
People are freaking out, and you almost want to say it's more of a people problem than an insect problem.
In the past, the fire ant's domain was limited to South America. But by the end of the Second World War, the first wave of ants had made landfall in the USA, stowaways on a ship bound for the port of Mobile, Alabama. Within a few decades, the fire ant was poised for a full-scale invasion. In many ways, this ant is the ultimate invader. It's a fighter, a hunter that will devour almost anything in its path, dead or alive. It overwhelms all opposition through sheer weight of numbers. With an army near 250,000 strong, a colony operates as a single superorganism and can ravage the landscape. It's no wonder that scientists dub this ant species invicta, meaning unconquered. Fire ants take no prisoners, which is why conservationists see ants as a major threat to several species: seabirds, turtles, even alligators. As this deadly red tide pushed ever onward, it was only a matter of time before it came into conflict with humans. Anyone stumbling upon a fire ant mound quickly learns its terrible secret. This ant has a nasty sting in its tail.
If you live in Florida and you do anything out of doors, you're going to get stung by fire ants. Fire ant encounters are very, very common. More common than bee, wasp, yellow jacket, and hornet, the other insects that people think about as stinging insects.
Let me tell you this. In Florida, a day without fire ants is like a day without sunshine. The ants are always there, and in my profession, as I'm walking around collecting and doing cuttings and trimming and stuff like that, I've always gotten bit. I would come home from the end of a work day, and I would be covered with ant bites up and down my legs, on my forearms, my hands, my knuckles. Once you get bit by quite a few, 1 to 100 of them, it doesn't matter. It hurts, and I don't recommend it for anyone.
Victims say the sting is like a burning match pushed into their skin. The fire ant anchors itself with its powerful jaws and repeatedly drives in its sting. At the same time, it releases a chemical call to arms, and others rush to join the fray. Severely stung victims may require skin grafts or even amputation. Worse still, it seems that this plague on mankind can actually prove fatal.
We may be witnesses to a biblical prophecy come true, and the beast shall reign over the earth.
Being outdoors in the southeastern United States can be a real pain. No matter where you are, the chances are good that you'll be stung by the fire ant, unless you take precautions. People have devised a range of ingenious accessories that stop the ants in their tracks.
Since I've been wearing the ant boots and the ant gloves, I never fear ever being bit again by those fire ants. I go about my daily work day without any fear at all. It's a very comfortable atmosphere now, instead of always wondering about being threatened when the next time I was going to be bit by those fierce little things.
The basic premise of ant boots is to prevent the ants from getting on your flesh. As they crawl up the boots, they run into a false fur. There's a certain density and length to create the largest obstruction possible for them. It's equal to you or I trying to crawl over a brush pile the size of a building. We'll eventually either get tired, lose our way, or just plain give up. The full range of ant boot products include many colors and styles of boots, oil-resistant soles, as well as steel-toe boots for industry use. I've developed horse boots, sheep boots, although sheep really don't like them. They still work effectively, though. As humor goes, we find it funny that we can play with the ants and not be bitten, but the funniest thing still is watching somebody shuck their clothes out in the field when they step in the ant pile and you see a naked butt running around screaming due to the ant bites. That still gives me a charge.
Now, don't get the idea that our homes are safe from attack by the fire ant. Betty!
For some people, ant stings are deadly serious.
We see many, many more problems and serious reactions and even deaths in 1 year from fire ants than we would see over a decade from venomous snakes here in Florida. So it's a much more common problem and a much more serious problem. A lot of people don't know they're allergic to a stinging insect. And that's one of the major problems with stinging insect allergy. In fact, up to 50% of people who have fatal reactions from a stinging insect, such as a bee, wasp, yellow-jacket hornet, or fire ant in this case, do not know they're allergic. And when they're stung, they end up with a fatality. Reactions can occur very, very quickly. In fact, an individual could be stung and 5 minutes later be in anaphylactic shock, and in 5 minutes die from this particular kind of reaction. So these reactions can have a very, very swift onset, and they can lead to a fatality within minutes. It doesn't have to be more than one. It could be one single fire ant. Each year in this country, it's estimated about 200 people die from stinging insects. Fire ants in the southeast probably account for most of those stinging insect deaths. This is a classic David and Goliath kind of confrontation. I mean, you can imagine an ant that's millimeters long taking down, killing a human being that's 200, 250 pounds. That's not unusual at all.
These are the casualties of war. As ants go on the rampage, allergy sufferers like Chelsea Black have to be constantly on their guard.
Have you been stung by a fire ant since we saw you last time?
No. I've been allergic to ants since I was 2 years old. If I get stung by one ant, it'll itch, and if I get stung by a couple of ants, it'll swell up where I got bit.
Blood pressure's normal.
Last year, on the 4th of July, we were at a beach, and I was walking, and I stepped in an ant pile, and I got bit by 10 ants, and my foot swelled up, and I couldn't fit it into a shoe.
And you're carrying your adrenaline syringe with you, epinephrine syringe. You carry that with you, right?
A shot of adrenaline will arrest an anaphylactic shock reaction. The epinephrine syringe Chelsea carries could mean the difference between life and death.
Right. So, any other questions?
No.
Okay, good to see you.
I've been coming to the clinic here getting my shots for almost 9 years. I get my shots almost every month.
Hi, Chelsea.
Injections of an extract of ant venom build up Chelsea's immunity and make it possible for her to live a normal life.
It stings for a little bit, and sometimes it'll itch. But sometimes it doesn't. Well, basically, I hate them. I hate ants.
Although we can now combat the deadly sting, fire ants are still killing people. And while ants can't be held liable for their actions, people who knowingly put other people in danger can be. That's why there are cases where fire ants have been brought before a judge.
Most cases aren't brought just because the fire ant stung somebody. They're brought because someone knew there was a problem with the fire ants and either failed to eradicate the problem or failed to warn the patient or the guest that there was a fire ant problem, and that's where the legal actions are brought.
Take the case of the uninvited guests. An elderly couple who checked into a reputable motel in Louisiana had no idea they'd be sharing their room. While they lay sleeping, tiny intruders crept in and under the covers. When the fire ants attacked, the elderly gentleman was stung so severely he had to be rushed to a hospital.
In the hospital, he would seem to recover, but then get a little worse, and it just ultimately just took him. It took him about 3 weeks to die. In this case, the real liability that attached to the motel was that they had a bad fire ant problem, a serious infestation. It was profit over safety. They knew that they had a problem, but they ignored it, and they just continued to rent those rooms.
This case settled out of court. The victim's family was awarded damages to the sum of 6 figures. Things may look peaceful in the sun-drenched South, but every year over half of the population in fire ant-infested areas will be attacked. Tens of thousands will require medical attention, and the numbers are on the rise.
One of the reasons we are having so many attacks with people in the southeastern United States is that the populations in the southeastern United States, in the Sun Belt, is increasing. The populations of people are not only increasing, the populations of fire ants are also increasing. So consequently, you're going to have more of a chance of people and ants coming into contact with one another. During hot, dry summer months in the South and the Sun Belt, they will tend to move indoors searching for food and water. It doesn't matter whether it's an apartment complex, a nursing home, a clinic, a person's home, a dog house, a doll house. Wherever they can find moisture and food, they will move indoors.
But there's another attraction for the ant indoors. For some reason, fire ants are drawn to electric fields, like moss to a flame. And if you thought ants in your pants were dangerous, they're nothing compared to ants in your appliances.
When ants get into electrical equipment, one of the big problems, of course, is they short this stuff out. And this means if you have even a light socket, if you don't have a light bulb in there, fire ants have actually gotten into light sockets and actually will short out the light socket. And this can lead to some other serious problems, such as fires. And, of course, obviously destroying the ability of electric equipment to work. One of the things that fire ants really cause some problems with is they get into traffic signal equipment and short that equipment out. And this means the traffic lights go off and you have a lot of people who then are speeding forward and cause accidents. So this causes a real serious problem, obviously, and some serious injuries.
Fire ants have even caused havoc at airports. In this business, power outages can spell disaster for thousands of people. As a result of several near misses, today all wiring must be ant-proofed. But while we're able to safeguard some things, it's impossible to protect others. Ever since the ants landed, farmers have borne the brunt of the invasion. Quick to try anything edible, fire ants cause damage to at least 57 species of cultivated plants. Fire ants will tunnel underground to feed on roots and planted seeds, and climb up to eat buds and developing fruit. And it's not just plants that the ants go for. Humans harvesting crops often incur the ants' wrath. In badly infested fields, workers can demand danger money or even refuse to work. Fire ants can even damage harvesting machinery. In fact, fire ants can destroy machines of all kinds, both down on the farm and in the backyard.
In terms of homeowners and residential stuff, you can have some fire ant damage. They will dull your lawnmower blades really fast. And if you're not careful, you can actually further damage your equipment, as I have done with the lawnmower I have. It's a twin-deck rotary system, and I twisted a shaft in two. It was a combination of hitting pecan tree limbs and hitting fire ant mounds, and it just twisted that 3/4 inch metal shaft right in two. The metal just could not take the repeated abuse. What do you do about the fire ant mounds? You can pick up the pecan tree limbs and haul them off if you see them. What are you going to do about the fire ant mound? You just got to run over it. For some reason I do attract fire ants, and I'm not sure why. There have been several instances where I have just been standing around and the fire ants would just swarm to me, which is why when I'm outside I'm rarely still, because I know from long, painful experience, if I don't keep moving, I'm going to get bitten and stung. I don't really know why this is. It probably has something to do with my body chemistry. I just attract ants, and they just love me for some reason.
But all's fair in love and war.
Flash across country like scythes, wiping out everything that's trying to get away from them.
I tell you, gentlemen, science has agreed that unless something is done and done quickly, man, as the dominant species of life on Earth, will be extinct within a year.
Fire ants spread like wildfire within a few decades of landing. Realizing that they were under attack, people began to fight back.
There's two ways that I primarily deal with ants here. One of which is we use diazinon, which is a chemical commercially available. It's a broadcast chemical. We scatter it around the yard. This is where the children play. I have 2 small children. And the other way is direct application of a petrochemical. Diesel, gasoline, kerosene. Pour it on it, you kill them to death. The environmentalists hate this. They absolutely say it ruins the environment. You just can't do it. But if you want to kill a fire ant, I guarantee if you take a cup of gasoline and pour it on that mound, you're going to kill those fire ants.
Persistent fire ants can drive a man to desperate measures.
Probably not very effective, but in terms of emotional satisfaction, you're not going to beat it. Take a 12 gauge and shoot a fire ant mound. You're probably not going to do much damage, but if you penetrate deep enough, you might kill the queen.
But for really serious ant invasions, you need to call in the big guns. Pest control companies are licensed to kill. They use the strongest insecticides and spray them directly onto ant mounds. This kills ants fast, and a follow-up application of broadcast bait will mop up any survivors.
People can put up with a lot of different pests on their property, but fire ants tend to be one of the ones they don't tolerate. A lot of people are allergic to them. They have a general dislike for insect pests, or they have a social event coming up, so they want us to take care of them now. So that's what we do.
Throughout the Southeast, there are legions of pest control companies. They employ huge arsenals of chemical weapons to keep the fire ant at bay. Some Texas households spend over $200 on fire ant control every year.
In Texas, the eastern two-thirds of the state are infested with red imported fire ant. The spread continues. Our ag economists have been doing surveys of the impact of fire ants not only in agriculture but in urban areas. And one survey has shown that in the 5 major metroplex areas in Texas, that would be Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, the fire ants are costing us about $600 million a year, with about half of that cost being attributed to people buying and applying pesticides to try to deal with the problem.
Poison baits strike at the heart of the colony. Foraging ants carry the deadly delicacy down into the mound. The baits are designed to kill slowly because ants share food by mouth-to-mouth regurgitation. Slow-acting toxins use the ants as vectors to pass the poison throughout the colony. But the sophisticated poisons of today are a far cry from the weapons of mass destruction of the past. Through the 1950s and 60s, the war against the fire ant continued to escalate as people searched for the ultimate chemical weapon.
This is your TV farm reporter bringing you the latest in the fire ant eradication program. And the areas treated to date, officials and farmers report excellent kills of fire ant.
Vast tracts of agricultural and urban areas were sprayed with deadly pesticides, including the most infamous ant poison of all, Mirex.
In 1962, Mirex bait came online as the method of choice for controlling the imported fire ant. The bait looked fantastic. It was giving 98 to 99% control, and many people thought at that time that with this bait, you put in a very small amount of active ingredient on an acre, around 4 grams of actual chemical on an acre, that it would be the solution to the fire ant problem.
Just as we have cleansed the nation of other insects, the imported fire ant can be eliminated.
Provided all people cooperate, there will be no damage when the airplanes or ground equipment go to work. No damage, that is, except to the fire ant.
The poisoning of the South was run like a military campaign. In fact, so much pesticide fell from the sky that the campaign has been described as the Vietnam of entomology.
The history of the fire ant is full of overreaction and poorly rationalized programs. Mirex was introduced as the perfect pesticide. They actually used those words. But very soon turned out to be far from perfect.
Ant colonies are tough. If they're not dealt a killer blow, a colony will simply pack up and move on.
So you would clean an area out of 1,000 to 2,000 to 50,000 acres, and the fire ant would simply reinvade the area and start colonies anew. So it was a never-ending treadmill of putting this chemical out to try to control the fire ant. It was not going to work as an eradication method.
Worse still, Mirex began to accumulate in non-target organisms. Pesticide residues were detected in the fatty tissues and milk of cattle and other mammals.
Humans are part of the food chain too, so they're not exempt from these processes that concentrate myrics, so very soon myrics began to show up in human tissues, and by the late 60s, early 70s, approximately a third of Southerners had detectable myrics in their fatty tissue.
In 1977, the pesticide was finally banned when it was discovered that myrex was a potential carcinogen.
The myrex program was criticized heavily for its expense, its widespread use, and its contamination of the environment. And a lot of the criticisms were justified. But it was a congressional mandate to undertake the eradication with myrex. In fairness to the politicians who, of course, demanded that the government scientists, that the U.S. Department of Agriculture do something about the fire ants, they were under pressure from their constituents, which was the driving force for the whole program. The constituents demanded that the government do something about this invasive pest species.
I've tried to understand how the myrex program came into being and why it stayed alive as long as it did. And I mean, obviously I don't have any definitive answers to that, but I think some of the elements in it must be a mindset of man's ability and right to dominate nature, which is certainly widespread in our society. A very strong degree of entomophobia, that is fear of insects and hatred of insects in our culture, and a deep and abiding faith that technology can solve just about any problem.
In hindsight, it seems the massive poisoning campaign actually helped the fire ant invasion. One of the secrets to the fire ant's success is its ability to rapidly dominate disturbed landscapes, which is exactly what you get when you spray vast amounts of pesticides. At present, it's climate, not poison, that's stemming the red tide. The ants can't survive the harsh winters to the north or the dry deserts to the west. But where there's a will, there's a way. In the early days, the fire ant made some of its greatest gains in territory by stowing away in nursery stock, traveling across state lines. Even today, despite rigid quarantines on the movement of agricultural materials, people are still unwittingly aiding the ant invasion. They've managed to hitchhike out west to California and press eastward to Virginia and the nation's capital. Not only have people helped the ants to disperse, they've also created the perfect habitat for the ants to thrive in.
So the people that are clearing this land don't know it, but they're making the world safe for fire ants. The forest behind me there is entirely unsuited for fire ants. So by clearing the forest, as you see here, people have converted the habitat into one that's very suitable for fire ants, in which the competitors that are in the forest have been entirely removed. And this is essentially fire ant heaven.
The great majority of ants never venture more than a few feet from the mound. But deep within each colony, a handful of ants are preparing for a mission that will take them much further afield. This is the colony's airborne division of sexually active males and females. They're the chosen few who take the battle to new lands.
The sexuals that this colony is currently producing are going to go on a mating flight, and the queens, after they finish mating, are going to land in that area over there and start new colonies. This is what fire ants do best. They colonize ecologically disturbed land.
The mating season takes a heavy toll, with perhaps only 1 in every 1,000 queens surviving to found a colony. But 1 is enough for fire ants to continue spreading across the countryside.
if we're lucky, we'll find the queen, who is the mother of all of these workers and all of these sexuals. Yep, there she is. There she is. One fat, sassy queen. This is the mother of all the workers in that colony, all 250,000 of them. Her abdomen is hugely enlarged. It's mostly ovaries. She's about 75% ovaries by weight. And she can lay eggs at the rate of 1 to 2 every minute. And she does this around the clock. I love these babies. They're just such an amazing creation. You can now clearly see the swollen abdomen, the white ovaries showing between the plates. This is just an egg-laying machine.
The fire ant queen is the sovereign of a vast empire. She will produce as many offspring in a single day as some ant species produce in a year, and up to 3 million in her lifetime. And this is just one colony. There are literally billions of colonies distributed across the southern United States. Faced with such overwhelming odds, some people fear that the battle is lost. But there still may be hope. A small band of dedicated scientists are about to join forces with some of the ants' most deadly foes.
Here is a fear-frenzied moment of suspense as mankind totters before a thing that multiplies faster than it can be killed.
In Gainesville, Florida, the USDA Agricultural Research Service is leading the fight against the fire ant.
To eradicate fire ants can be done theoretically with the chemicals that are available, but it would take enormous repeated applications, and what would the cost be? In dollars, tremendous. In environmental impact, also tremendous. Adverse impact. So we truly need something that's self-sustaining to push the populations down. They're here, they're going to be here. Eradication is not something that's feasible. So let's start looking at something practical and rational to help the public reduce their dependence on the pesticides to a point where they don't even recognize that fire ants may be in their area.
In South America, the fire ant isn't a major pest, thanks to a range of predators and pathogens. Without this natural population control, fire ant density in the USA is 5 times higher than South America. That's why scientists are using biological warfare to reunite the ants with their old enemies. Researchers are experimenting with naturally occurring pathogens in the hope of finding microorganisms that will devastate the fire ant's forces. But this germ warfare will be just one offensive in the all-out assault. One of the fire ant's most dreaded adversaries will provide air cover. This is the fire ant's nemesis, the tiny phorid fly.
One of the things that makes us real excited about these flies is that the fire ants recognize them as enemies. Even after 70 years of being free from these flies, we bring them up into the United States and they still recognize them.
The phorid fly is a fire ant's worst nightmare. They hover just out of reach, waiting for an opportunity to dart in and inject an egg into the ant's body. This is real-life invasion of the body snatchers. The egg grows into a maggot, which slowly eats the ant alive. Sanford and his team collect trays full of ant corpses to harvest the flies as they emerge. To ensure a reliable supply, they've turned a natural process into a production line. The end result is vast squadrons of airborne anteaters. Sanford gives nature a helping hand by providing the flies with captive prey.
We bring these flies then into these attack boxes, and we introduce several thousand fire ants from the field that we've collected. And these ants from the field then are running back and forth in the box while the flies are attacking them.
The trays in the attack box contain 2 cups. When one is raised, the other sits on the surface. When ants and their eggs are dropped into the tray, the ants rush to hide their brood under the upturned cup. However, just as they get their eggs out of harm's way, a timer clicks over and the cup raises. Out in the open again, the race is on to find new shelter. As the ants struggle to move their young, they're defenseless against the aerial attack of the forward fly. They run the gauntlet again and again, giving the flies ample opportunity to deliver their deadly cargo. The program to release forward flies is already swung into action, with fly squadrons ready to be deployed across the South.
In order to be sure that the flies were biologically safe, we tested their specificity in the field, and we tested their specificity in the lab, and they are extremely host specific. They're only attracted to fire ants. These flies are like little guided missiles, biological smart bombs. They're specific to imported fire ants, and that's the only kind of organism that they're going to be able to attack.
Could the fire ants have met their match?
The return of the fly, seeking revenge with 1,000 eyes, smashing anything that stands in his way.
Despite all the weaponry being leveled at it, experts fear that the fire ant will continue its march across America. Climatic barriers are crumbling as the ant adapts to local conditions. Eradication is not an option. Research efforts must now focus on limiting the damage.
Ultimately, our goals are to reduce fire ant populations in the United States so that they're somewhat comparable to what they are in South America. There's not a single silver bullet, there's not a single device or technology that's going to do that. This has to be a nationwide community effort, all the way down to the homes. It's got to be the homeowner that has a part in how to manage fire ants. So by getting this message first to the kids, they understand the science, they understand the implications, and this now goes back to the parents, to the community, and becomes a part of their way of life.
Across the nation, people are getting to know their enemy. By pinpointing the exact locations of fire ant infestation, pesticide application can be kept to a minimum. In this way, zero-tolerance areas, such as schools and homes, can be kept ant-free with the least possible environmental impact. By using precision targeting, people can reduce pesticide usage. Education campaigns are spreading the word about the best ways to combat the fire ant.
Every year you resolve to beat this team, and every year you experience the agony of defeat. Come together as a team and plan your attack. Use the right gear in the right way so you and the environment don't get hurt.
One small community has even decided if you can't beat 'em, join 'em. For the people of Ashburn, Georgia, the Fire Ant Festival recognizes the big part the ant plays in everyday life.
The Fire Ant Festival started 6 years ago. We have it every year in the spring, the fourth weekend of March. And we do a lot of silly, crazy things to draw people into town. We have a fire ant calling contest. We have a fire ant fling, where we have a plastic fire ant and we try to see how far we can fling it. And it's the only time every year we know where we bring that many people to town. This last year we brought about 12,000 people to town. When we think of the fire ant in Ashburn and Turner County, it's an adage that we have here is turning lemons into lemonade. So we've turned something negative into something positive. Mostly when people think of fire ants, they think of the damage that they do. But now we've turned it into something positive and turned it into a time when people in our community come together and a fun time.
So, to some people at least, the ant isn't really the demon that others make it out to be.
In contrast to the hatred that other people feel for fire ants, I, of course, am quite fond of them. I sometimes fantasize about this story I'd like to write about this pioneer family that comes over to this new world and finds opportunity on an unprecedented scale. I mean, truly, it's a land of opportunity. And of course, that pioneer is the fire ant. And in fact, it has arrived in the land of opportunity. It's no less a land of opportunity for the fire ant than it is for humans.
This is a column I wrote for the Wiregrass. It's called Fire Ants Ho. Fire ants must hate me. If so, the feeling is mutual. I've shot them. I've used every pesticide I could find on them. I've poured gas, diesel, and oil on them. I've even been known to add insult to injury and set fire to the mound afterward. Fire ants are like Southerners in that if you pick on one, Bubba, you're messing with the whole family. It never gives up. Poison them, burn them, stomp them, do whatever you will to try to annihilate them. They keep coming back. If that ain't Southern, I don't know what is.
Don't think that fire ants is a United States problem. To get complacent here becomes extremely dangerous and damaging long term. Global trade policies being what they are today, free trade, the likelihood is that we will end up seeing more and more pests finding the environment that they need to survive, regardless of what country it is. So this is the time to be very diligent for new invasive species. Understand where they can survive. Where do you have that within your own country? Because the fire ants aren't going to stop out of courtesy. They're going to find every conceivable niche where they can survive.
In February 2001, the red imported fire ant was discovered at the port of Brisbane, Australia, a continent previously free of the pest. Our worst fears are being realized. The ant that ate America is beginning its global campaign. Bolt your doors, bar your windows, and beware. It may be coming soon to a town near you.